In 1907, a German engineer named August Natterer experienced one of the most intense psychotic episodes ever recorded. According to the accounts, he suddenly felt something open inside his head, and for exactly 30 minutes, he claimed to see more than 10,000 images flashing before his eyes, as if someone had activated a projector inside his mind and forced him to witness, scene by scene, what he would later call the Last Judgment. In these visions, he reported seeing God, demons, angels, incomprehensible symbols, and a terrifying figure he described as the witch who created the universe. For him, this episode felt so real that afterward he attempted to take his own life and was admitted to a psychiatric hospital where he was later diagnosed with schizophrenia. In this hospital, Natterer set out to draw every image he had seen years earlier during that psychotic episode, hoping to understand them, and in one of these drawings, he created an image he titled "My Eyes at the Moment of the Apparitions," where we see only two eyes with extremely dilated pupils on a blank sheet of paper, along with nearly illegible words at the top. Thanks to a psychiatrist and art historian named Hans Prinzhorn, today we know the story of August Natterer. For him, the drawings made by patients in psychiatric hospitals were not simply delusions, but works that also had to be considered art, perhaps even one of the purest forms of art that existed. For this reason, in the early 20th century, Prinzhorn set out to travel through psychiatric hospitals and ask doctors to send him any artistic work created by their patients. Drawings, paintings, sculptures, anything. His goal was to build a collection that would allow people to understand how the creative mind works beyond reason, even when that mind is fractured by madness. In 1922, he published a book with his findings titled Artistry of the Mentally Ill, and among more than 450 patients and thousands of drawings, one man stood out above the rest, and that was the story of August Natterer. Later on, I'll tell you why. But unfortunately, a large part of the drawings Natterer created during his stay in the psychiatric hospital were destroyed. However, some still survive, like the one you're seeing right now, which he titled The Witch's Head. The Witch's Head was created in 1915, and it is an optical illusion. On transparent paper, Natterer depicted a landscape that can simultaneously be seen as the silhouette of a witch. A large lake forms the face, a pier becomes a ribbon that marks the transition from the head to the neck, and a boulevard creates the brim of her hat. Despite the covering on her head, you can still see the fissures between the bones of her skull. To understand the importance of this drawing, we must remember that in his visions, he had seen a witch, whom Natterer himself recognized as the creator of the universe, so he depicted her head multiple times. The Witch's Head was shown for the first time in the large touring exhibition of the Prinzhorn collection in 1980 and 1981, and it soon became one of the most reproduced works in the entire collection. When it was exhibited, this fascinatingly ambiguous image was even compared to the works of Giuseppe Arcimboldo, whom we've discussed in other videos, and who was also a specialist in creating optical illusions roughly 500 years earlier. As for the drawing itself, some of the buildings surrounding the lake, represented in perspective, have been identified as the Catholic Church of St. Jodok from Natterer's hometown of Ravensburg on the left, and the Moorish-style Janitza tobacco factory in Dresden on the right. It seems Natterer used images taken from various books or magazines to construct his composition. Now, the collection of artworks created by people with mental illness, assembled by Hans Prinzhorn in Heidelberg in the 1920s and presented in his book, had an enormous influence, one that is still unknown or overlooked by many, yet deeply significant in 20th century art. As the French poet Paul Éluard described it, this collection would become the best picture book that has ever existed. The drawings spread among the surrealists of that era as a kind of instruction manual for their own works, and it also became a silent source of inspiration for several artists, including Paul Klee, Max Ernst, Alfred Cuban, and Jean Dubuffet. Dubuffet himself coined the term art brut to refer to the artistic expressions created by patients in psychiatric institutions. This term was later translated by art critic Roger Cardinal in 1972 as outsider art, used more broadly to refer to self-taught artists, even if they had never been in a psychiatric institution. With the arrival of the 1930s, the work of August Natterer and many other artists highlighted by Prinzhorn in his book were targeted and condemned by the Nazi regime. In 1937, Hitler's government organized a public exhibition of what they called degenerate art. This exhibition was designed to ridicule and discredit any form of art that did not align with the aesthetic and racial values of Nazism. Among the selected works were abstract, expressionist, and surrealist paintings, as well as drawings created by psychiatric patients, including the work of August Natterer. For the Nazis, art made by people with mental illnesses had no aesthetic or cultural value. They considered it visual proof of what they called spiritual degeneration. In this context, Natterer's hallucinations turned into drawings were not seen as human or artistic expressions, but as ideological deformities. Being both a mental patient and a modern artist, Natterer fit perfectly onto their blacklist, resulting in many of his works being mocked during the exhibition and later censored, hidden, or destroyed. The only drawing we could say still maintains its recognition today is My Eyes at the Moment of the Apparition. We also know what Natterer said happened to him right before he entered the psychiatric hospital for the first time. He described suddenly seeing a bright white spot in the sky that seemed to stop the clouds, and then a series of images appeared on it. Thousands of them, one after another, like a rapid slideshow. He said he saw divine figures, scenes of war, continents, monuments, and large castles, all shown in huge, almost colorless images. To him, these visions were part of the Last Judgment, revealed because Christ had been unable to complete salvation. This overwhelming experience led to a severe mental health crisis and marked the beginning of his long stay in several psychiatric institutions over the remaining 26 years of his life, until August Natterer passed away in 1933 due to heart failure. Recent studies have suggested that certain conditions such as schizophrenia or bipolar disorder may be associated with a phenomenon known as brain hyperconnectivity. In other words, the brain forms unusual associations between ideas or images, which in some cases can translate into creative or original expressions. And although this does not mean that illness produces art, nor does it romanticize suffering, perhaps we should understand that extreme states of mind can also generate a legitimate form of expression. The line between romanticizing pain and recognizing its expressive value is thin but important. Natterer was not a tortured genius who found inspiration in chaos. He was a person who lived with a severe condition and, within that suffering, tried to put on paper what was happening inside him. To what extent can a troubled mind see things a healthy mind could never imagine? I'll leave the question for you. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Thank you for watching the video, and as always, if you'd like to support the channel and start your own art collection, you can do so through our website. There you'll find more than 800 historical artworks to choose from, so you can select your favorite and turn your home into your own personal museum. Worldwide shipping is free, and your purchase helps me continue creating videos like this one. You'll find a link in the description. Thank you for your support, and see you in the next video.